Hey Lisa,
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing today?
Very good.
You getting any snow? We've had like the lightest snow all for like hours here. Not doing anything, not accumulating, but it's very pretty out there. I hope you have the same.
My kind of snow.
Hi Louisa, how are you?
Hello, just want to make sure you can hear me.
Yeah, how are you doing, Louisa? How are you doing?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm just sharing that we have this like little dusting of snow happening all day that's making everything very pretty, but it won't make anything complicated for driving.
Yes, it's icy out there, so yeah.
So I'm gonna, obviously it's not even quite 1 o'clock yet. I'm just gonna wait a few minutes. I know especially I want to wait for Lily to be on because she really had the most substantive updates in there, and I would just love to defer to her to go over this, which I actually went through just a little while ago and think she has spot on great suggestions. I just want to make sure that she can kind of lead that discussion. Hi, Kara. How are you doing today? And hi, Jazeera. Nice to see you also. See your name.
Hi.
Hello, Bev. How are you today?
Good. How are you doing? Thank you for getting everything over as usual. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
Hi, Lily.
Hello.
So I got emails from a couple of folks who couldn't be here. So I don't know necessarily how many folks to expect, but if it's okay with you all, I just want to give it just a couple minutes before we get started, just so if other folks are going to join, we just have them start the conversation all in the same place.
Just so you know, Beth, I have Naugatuck Valley joining us, but I also have Millie joining us. She's our new college campus advocate.
Okay,
Wanted to make sure that she took part in this.
perfect. All right, maybe we'll wait about one more minute. And then Lily, what I was saying right before you hopped on is really, I went through the documents and your suggestions earlier, and I think they're all spot on. It really, I think, was mostly you and some of Hillary's suggestion, and I don't think Hillary's going to be able to be with us today. So I'm wondering maybe if I can defer to you to just kind of go through them. My guess is that, you're going to have most of us sort of agreeing with all the things that you put in there, but that way if there's any points of discussion, we can kind of have that as a group. And then what I could do after that is go through and accept all the changes, right? So it would kind of make it so that anything that we agreed to today collectively as a council would go ahead and become part of that final draft. And then I could very quickly then turn around and send that draft to, or just resend the link, I guess, to everybody, just to say, take one last look for those of you who are not able to join us today. Take one last look, and then we can then kind of move forward with how we want to put it out. And then we'll also obviously talk to Desire about how exactly we do that and in what format, kind of like the letter. I know it'll have to go on the council's webpage, but I'm not sure in terms of like the production of the document, if that's just like we just do it or there's a certain format or something that we have to follow. So if that makes sense, that's how we can kind of proceed today. So I guess we can go ahead and get started then. The only agenda item that we have is just to review that document, that larger guidance document that we talked about. And then if we had anything that we wanted to pull over into the FAQ document, that again was just 2 Google Docs that we had started. So with that, maybe it makes sense to turn it over to you, Lily. I don't know if you want to screen share or you want me to screen share to kind of walk through, or if it's helpful to do it in that way.
Yeah, I mean, do you want to screen share? And that way, if there are other things that you want to pull up along the way, that'll just be more flexible. And I also have it open here. So I think based on our conversation last time as a council, when I went into this document, what I tried to do was to take the council's guidance letter and to basically merge that in. I also included that guidance letter in its entirety at the end of the document. So then what I was doing throughout was shifting some items around and doing a little bit of formatting along the way, but then also trying to kind of marry up the structure of these 2 documents. And so you'll see in the introduction, for example, that I wrote in a sentence here that's sort of highlighted in a different color. Please refer to that guidance letter. That's an appendix here, and we've incorporated it in. So just kind of flagging that. And one of the other ideas that I had as I was doing this was that in places where the guidance letter had language that was relevant to this kind of broader report form, I thought it might be useful to just repeat that language rather than writing a different set of text. Just from experience on campus, sort of observing that if there's a policy language, you want to sort of try to refer folks to that or repeat the same policy language rather than paraphrasing, as that can sometimes inadvertently kind of cause more confusion. I don't know that would happen here, but that was sort of the operating principle that I was using. So then if we scroll down the next couple of pages, when I like the idea of including the prescribing legislation, and really throughout trying to kind of bring things into one place, make things easy to find. And I thought, if we could like use shading, or maybe we can put like a box around the copies of legislation, some kind of flag, even if it's subtle, to help the reader understand that here we're pasting in that other document and then kind of commenting on it was sort of what I thought might be useful. And you can see the comment that I included here to that effect. One thing that I wanted to ask the group was sort of whether we should intersperse sections of the prescribing legislation in this guiding document, or whether it makes more sense to other folks to have it sort of included as one block of language. And I wasn't sure what the best way to go was there, but I thought maybe if others had sort of an instinct, we could go with that.
I don't know that I have super strong feelings either way, but I do think what we could do is include the full language as an appendix, right? So it's all in one place, not chopped up. But I kind of like the idea, which I think you might have done in one section in here, if I'm remembering correctly, like putting in the pieces of it that you're speaking to exactly. And we could do just that. You could do a color, you could do a color block, or, even italics or bolding or so, something that would distinguish. But I also like the idea of putting it throughout where you're referencing it versus having to go back through and kind of parse through the language to match them up yourself.
That makes sense.
Keep going, sorry.
So then we have kind of, if overall in the document, it seems like it's sort of shaping up to have some general sections. So there's sort of the introductory piece that we just went through, and maybe we put the prescribing legislation there, or a piece of it there, and the rest of it as a later appendix. And then we get into this current section, which is talking about sort of where do different tools fit into this whole discussion. And then after this is where there's the sort of like questions for thought that we've that are still sort of under development. But this assessment tools section was one where I also was wondering sort of how best to craft this relative to the guidance letter that we put together. So here we have a table where we're reprinting example questions. And then at the end of the document, we have our sort of condensed table that just gives kind of a shorthand of here are the question numbers in a few different existing instruments. And it seems like there's value either way to sort of say either here is the full language kind of as these questions existed at the time, and in the future, like an individual campus or even consortia might develop the language on these. But at least sort of in the idea of saying like this is sort of a one-stop shop, you can have a full and rich discussion with this one guiding document. Reprinting the language here seemed like it's sort of helpful in that way. Or I could see someone saying, well, you already have a condensed table, and if someone wants to look up the language on these, like they're free to go and do so. So I wanted to kind of raise that as a design choice that we could make, and see whether folks had an impression either way of sort of what might be most useful.
Well, I'm not higher ed, so I don't know how this would be, taken by different schools. My feeling, just as being outside, is this is very easy to read. This the chart as is. I mean, it gives you clear examples. This is what we mean by this, and these are how the questions would look. So to me, layperson, that looks very easy as is.
I agree.
I agree. I like the simplicity of it. I like how easy your eyes can go through the whole thing. And if you want to learn more, you just click on something and you go into deeper content, because when there's, I don't know about everybody else, when there's too much verbiage, you kind of check out after a while, and it's just like, okay, just get to the point. And this, when I read it, it's very much straight to the point. It's very easy to read. The language is great. Thank you very much for that. But I think it'll be great for them to have it so simple this way. And actually, for those who want to extend it, and just click on the link, like you said, just to go further and deeper.
And I just also agree that this seems to be very easily readable, and I think would help with any confusions to have it in this type of format.
Perfect.
Thank you. So that's really helpful feedback to know that we're kind of moving in the right direction. And then that brings us to the a section that we have labeled right now as implementation guidance. And so this was really the section that I ended up sort of moving things around the most in that suggesting mode, so that it's all reversible. But as I was reading through the earlier draft of this document, I found myself categorizing pieces of our draft into different kind of subsections. And some of that was mentally organizing our ideas and suggestions within the framework that we give in our guidance letter. And some of that was sort of realizing that there are themed sections that, we've certainly talked about as a council quite a bit, and that we might also want to raise to campuses as sort of domains of this kind of assessment work that they should have on their radar. So the 3 sections that I thought might be relevant here, if thanks, Beth, are outreach and support, methods and approaches, and then transparency and translation. And please wordsmith away. But these categories also kind of connected with what we put into our guidance letter as well. And I then also thought maybe it would be helpful to pull the most relevant section of our guidance letter up. And so that I tested out with section number 1, and that didn't, I think it didn't make it into the current set of edits. It looks like that was maybe another person on the council sort of read through, and that could have, that might not have like resonated, or it might have sort of been choppy. But you can imagine having sort of a subheader here, outreach and support, and we have a paragraph in our guidance letter sort of framing out that sort of where this fits and its importance in running an assessment. And then I also pulled up the paragraphs that Hillary had noted are so important, which you see here, which really give some overarching guidance. And these are not questions for thought. These are I think, pretty clear recommendations of best practices. So I thought it made sense to really foreground them. And then following those are the draft questions for thought and sort of topics of discussion that seem to me like fit well under this umbrella of how are you doing outreach about the survey ahead of time and while the survey is open? And at the same time, how are you supporting your students of varying needs and varying communities through this assessment work in various ways? Following that section, I gathered a couple of the ideas that existed there and added one and felt like this is maybe a place to build out a little bit more into this methods and approaches section. And so this gives an example as well of formatting wise, how we might pull language from our guidance letter up into the main document so that we're sort of conveying, here's an overarching sort of understanding of members of this council. And then how does that translate into questions for discussion that each institution should have when they're planning assessments? So this is a section that I thought we actually had relatively fewer additional questions for thought framed out so far. And you can see I added one here much more recently, this idea of like, what data already exist on your campus? How can you think about reducing student burden or designing your assessment strategy so that you're actually, learning over time from each of these successive projects. Other ideas that have come up in the past in the council are sort of how are you considering which tool or tools to use? Do you want to consider working with a vendor as you talk with colleagues and students about weighing different factors in the design and implementation of this kind of work? You might find that considerations such as data privacy or confidentiality help you make decisions about what methods to use. And that's to be expected. And then the third section that I kind of framed out here was transparency and translation. And again, bringing this italic section is just a direct quote from our guidance letter. And then this is I think an example of in the document where like really differentiating the formatting might be helpful. So we have a quote from our guidance letter. We have sort of questions for thought that we can maybe add a couple to kind of build out the section a little bit more. And we also have a highly relevant excerpt from the prescribing legislation. And so all of this is kind of present at the same time. And Beth, to your comments earlier about the role of formatting, I think a lot that can do like a lot of lifting here. One thing I wanted to share with the council as I was thinking about sort of what are these categories and what might they convey, was that in titling this section sort of in draft mode, transparency and translation, I started to use only the word transparency or data sharing, or something like that. But then my thought was that kind of maybe wouldn't have done as much work to highlight for campuses that one of the main outcomes here is to actually use the information they collect. And so that was my hope with bringing in this word translation, that might kind of flag that that goal. But
What do you think about implementation?
Mm-hmm.
Like, because for me, when I first looked at it, right, like my first assumption, honestly, and this is just like how I use translation most of my life, probably, right, is like an actual translating it into another language or translating to make it more, I thought about accessibility, basically, right? So I wonder if part of what I saw and what I hear you talking about and saw here is like you're saying, not just that we need to be transparent about what we find, but we actually have to do something with what we find, right? We have to say, okay, like we identified that, students in this section of campus feel like they don't have the ability to report, and we have to, remove some barriers. So maybe it's like implementation of data gathered or something that signals just that there's a component of action, not just that you're, gathering data for the sake of simply gathering data.
Yeah, Beth, the other word that came to mind for me was like application,
Yeah. Okay.
but similar, yeah, similar thought process.
Yeah, I really like that.
Okay. And I'm taking, as I always do, y'all know, like just copious notes so that I can do, because what we'll do basically after this, like, is I'm going to go through, I'm going to resend this to everybody so that, and especially you, Lily, so you're making sure I've captured or corrected that kind of stuff. But I'll make sure that I add these kind of changes as we update the document.
It's super helpful.
And I think that's these are the other things that'll be in there. One appendix, as we talked about, will be the letter that was sent out. This was another contact list that was sent out. So this can obviously, and we'll change, it won't be neon yellow. Or I guess we'll get some guidance on what we're supposed to change, and then we can change it accordingly. And then we'll put in the whole prescribing legislation as just a separate, sort of standalone, I think, at the end here. But is there anything else you all can think of that would be helpful to have as just an additional document? Like one of the campus folks reached out to say, can we share a full copy of the the AAU and the ARC3, right? Like, I don't know if that is possible to do, or if we can just share, I think there's some, links to the full instruments here, but is there anything else you can think of that'd be helpful to have as we pull the full document together? And I can stop. Sorry, screen sharing, so we're not making that anymore.
I think if we're able to receive clarity from our legislative colleagues about the questions that we raised at our last meeting,
Yeah.
That would be really helpful procedural information to share.
Right, the reporting components and that kind of stuff.
And like what is the process, and who has responsibility for making decisions about whether a plan or a set of actions is in compliance or not.
And Lily, I can actually give you kind of an update because I sent your questions from the email to our legislative research, and they said they got on it and said they'll get back to me. So hopefully, by early next week, I could follow up with them and possibly give you guys that information, if that helps.
Yeah, for sure. because the other thing that we can do, and obviously because this is like specific policy work, we would just identify paying for this outside of, any of our other work. But we have an amazing communications sort of team that we use. Because one of the things I'm thinking with the document, and this is just if you can tell us, like, I don't know if this is something we're supposed to turn over the content or we're supposed to turn over a final like polished document to you, right? I'm not quite sure on the process there. But one of the things I was thinking is that it'd be really easy for us to kind of work with them to use both like icons. So when it's referring to the legislation, you use one icon. When it's referring to the letter, you use another icon, and kind of just put color into, it would be it'd be easy to do. So I'm happy to take the initiative, like, to take that on. I just don't want to forego any process that I'm not supposed to, if we're not supposed to be doing something like that. Because my next step would be taking all of the feedback from all of you, asking our team to do that, right? To sort of lay it out in a way that we all think would be the most like user-friendly, accessible format. And then we'd be resending it out to the full council with a very quick turnaround to say, please review any last minute things that you feel like need to be in here, because we want to very quickly get this out to campuses. When it goes out to campuses, so I've been working on the back end, and I know, Kara, I still need to follow up with you to make sure I go over these questions. But I have a colleague who's helping me with just creating that Google form. So what would happen is likely we'd have a link to this document, or we'd be sending it out like in an email, like I've sent some other stuff. We'd be asking folks to go ahead and to give us any relevant feedback, just literally simply through this form. And I actually love what you did, Lily, because it did for us what we talked about in our last meeting, to have those sections. So to have, okay, under section, I'm not remember, the last one is transparency and application. We get specific feedback under those sections, which might help us to organize, thoughts and kind of feedback. And then we really just have to decide as a council, what is our turnaround time then to get how much time do we want to give campuses, in other words, how much time do we want to give ourselves to comb through and, incorporate any suggestions? And then what's our target date with getting out this final guidance to campuses? I know at least one campus reached out, and it's the same conversation that we had. It was Cameron from UConn last time, sort of said, okay, what's the difference between prescribing legislation says must be implemented by, I want to say it was March 1st, right? And the reality is we're sort of thinking about this broader, I love the way that you talked about Lily last time, like you're setting up scaffolding before you're even, sort of applying, putting the campus survey out, right? So some of that stuff I think is also stuff that like we want to be really timely with everything, because I think some folks are feeling that like, oh no, I have to have this whole thing done very soon. And I think for some campuses, they've been doing it for years and they, don't feel nervous about that. I think for others, it is a little bit new, kind of having, doing this work on their individual campuses. So I think the sooner that we can get stuff out, sorry, it's a very long-winded way of saying it, the better it will be more helpful to the campus communities. So I don't know if anybody has thoughts about kind of like what timeline we want to assign. But I know I want to make sure that before we pivot today, because I think we're in a great place, we just kind of identify those benchmarks. When do we want to have feedback from our council? When do we want to send it to campuses? How long do we want them to have? And then what's our target goal with getting out the final document?
Are we still aiming for a campus webinar at 10 a.m. on February 21st?
I think we are, yes. I mean, I've already sent that out. I'm sort of, I put my faith in the universe that we're going to make it all work. Just teasing, but no, I did send it out. I do think we're aiming to do that. We, again, will handle the back end, the registration of that, you know what I mean? But we'll depend on all of you as experts to be able to be there to go over the content. So I do think you're right. Maybe we've given ourselves the end date already, Lily, is, that's when everything needs to be totally, at least very shortly there before it needs to be out fully.
So, I mean, would it make sense to just kind of take the milestones that you listed and almost like map them in reverse?
Yeah, do that.
So we have a Q&A with a webinar. We want campuses to have time to review guidance and maybe also to send us their initial questions so that we can prepare for those. So I don't know if that would mean like if we got a this full document out by the 7th of February, and we said, we're going to discuss this at a webinar in 2 weeks. By the 14th, send us any initial questions you have so we can prepare for those, but also expect open Q&A on the 21st. That would mean that our completed document would have to be sent out by the 7th. And I don't know, is that enough time for us to do the kind of revision, formatting, and get the clarity around the legislative guidance?
I think it's probably enough time, definitely, for me to go in to do those edits, to get it to our folks to say, hey, can you do these very specific things? It's not a long document. I don't think it'll be a complicated process. So I think it's enough time on that end. I don't know, to your last question about the kind of naming the process for reporting, naming the process for who quote unquote approves the compliance, that would be kind of out of our control. So I can't answer that one, but the other two components I do believe we could get done by the 7th.
On that legislative compliance piece, I mean, would it be helpful? Maybe Jazira, this is a question for you, or that you could carry to other colleagues. Would it be helpful for us to try to find time for the members of the council to talk live with the research team? If there are elements here that, you know, live discussion would help to inform, or is this really the kind of question that's dealt with sort of in-house and that's kind of delivered to this type of council typically?
Do you mean like the question that you had in the email?
I'm sorry?
The question that you have in the email?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could. Are you thinking of them joining like a council meeting or like a separate meeting, like with you, Beth, and then our research team? Is that like what we're kind of thinking of, like them joining one of our meetings one day, or just having a separate kind of meeting?
So I'm agnostic to the gathering.
Yeah.
But just having been involved in other kinds of discussions about setting policy or clarifying policy,
Yeah.
I know sometimes it is just the most efficient thing to kind of have a live discussion.
Yeah. I could check in with the chairs, so Snap and Hanan, and see if we could, come up with, a time or where we could get the research team to meet with the council, or I can meet with you guys just to elaborate on the questions that you guys, you guys need that clarification.
Yeah, Beth, does that make sense to you? I don't know what the right procedures are.
Yeah, in my experience, sometimes with oil, like they kind of do their own thing and come back to you. I mean, I think if they have questions, they'll come back to us. So we can definitely offer it up. And if the chairs think it's at all helpful, know that you have folks who are willing to hop on and make the time to do it. My guess is I don't know for sure, but my guess is they're probably trying to figure out what that procedure is. Because I think it just hasn't been established, right? It's new legislation. We have not had them do it before. My guess is they'll look at maybe some of the other when campuses have to report prevention and awareness trainings that are happening. But I think it's probably just procedural rather than like, I don't know like what additional information would necessarily aid in having it, but we could definitely make sure that we're available if that's helpful at all, for sure.
Yeah, so I'll definitely like discuss with the chairs and online to see what our options are, and I'll email the both of you guys just to, update you guys on that, if that's helpful.
The other thing that I want to offer up, right, as we're having the conversation, is that I don't think we should necessarily, and again, I'm very happy to defer to the chairs because, they're really the experts in this, but I don't think we necessarily, if we don't have an answer by the 7th, I don't think we hold up the guidance document. I think what we have to do is say, this is this version coming out. These are the questions we're still looking to answer, and then know that we need to put up, something supplemental. Because I know sometimes things can take some time, and I
Okay.
think if we're gonna kind of keep on track, like with the way that we want to, and help the, the timing of the campuses who need to get this stuff out, we just are gonna have to say, I mean, because in reality, if we're saying March 1st is when they are they're started or completed, the bulk of it, they still have to do the analysis. They still, it's ending the survey doesn't mean that they're ready to send those reports in. So I think that it'll still have a little enough time to get to campuses to say, here's who you're going to send them to, here's on what date they're due by, here is the format, if there's that level of detail that's available. But my suggestion is that we don't hold it up. We just say that there's going to be an additional component that we're waiting on, the General Assembly to help us figure out.
Yep.
If that's okay. I mean, I don't know if other people feel differently, and I'm not the expert by any means. I'm just trying to think about like the timeline that we gave ourselves.
Yeah, I think no matter what, we should acknowledge in what we release, say by February 7th, that it is a question that institutions will have about what is in compliance and how is that determined. And hopefully we'll be able to acknowledge that that's a question and then answer it, carrying forward guidance that we receive. And if not, I think, Beth, your idea of saying this is forthcoming and, here's, who's working on it, would be helpful as well. So because that also, I think, would help clarify sort of where this council's role is.
Right.
In that.
And I don't expect, I mean, I'm going to be very transparent. I do not expect that this council's role to determine compliance of universities when implementing climate assessment. So I don't think in any world, like we're suggesting, or anybody else will suggest, that we or individuals of this group take on. I know that I'm not, that would not be my area of expertise to be able to do that. And I don't know that it's appropriate, in some way. So I don't think that's where we're going with it. I think we just need kind of like a response. And one of those responses, quite frankly, may be that you're do your best to being, in compliance using this guidance, but that there may not be a person that you go back to that gives it, the ultimate quote unquote approval for that. So, but that's also an answer, right? I think we have to have an answer no matter what, but certainly outside of the scope of what we would do as individual members of the council, for sure. Okay, so if the 7th is when we're trying to send stuff out, I'm gonna just back into these dates really quickly because y'all know I need to do my little summary at the end to make sure I have all the things. So what we will do, I will by Monday, if I can't get it out today, I will by Monday just do those edits and send it. It won't be the polished document. I want to be clear. This is just the text version, right? So everything we talked about today, all of the things that Lily went over, I'll go in and accept all those comments so you guys can, you'll still have access to it. There's nothing that you won't be able to see. And then I'm going to get that out to the council members, the rest of the council who's not here, and ask them by the end of next week, which is the 26th, to have provided any additional information, any additional thoughts or context that folks want to have added. I will simultaneously, because it won't change a ton if there is, some small edits that we have to do, we'll ask our folks again. And Jazeera, if this is not the right thing for us to try to do the final document, and that's supposed to be done with you or in-house, please let me know, because I by no means need to take on that piece if that's not like the right thing to do. But with the assumption that it's okay if we do that piece of it, what I will then do is get that next week to our communications folks. They will then do the thing I'm talking about, where they'll put colors and icons essentially to kind of block out the text. They'll give things headers and just polish it up a bit. That will then go out to our full council. Again, if this all works within, the first couple days. So the 29th or the 30th would be my guess. We'd probably get it out somewhere in there, which gives us, again, another week right around to kind of look at it to say, okay, this makes sense, or I really don't like this icon, or whatever it is, right? To kind of get everything. And then perhaps even earlier, but by the 7th, which is kind of three weeks from now, we will then be sending it out to campuses in the same way I sent out the guidance letter. So it'll go out to all those campus contacts that we have. It'll go up on the council's webpage. And then that will be a place where we will also have a survey that will go out along with the guidance document. And my guess is the same kind of survey could go up on the council's webpage. It's just going to be like a link, you know, to go out to a Google form. And what we would then say is we're trying to, you know, collect as much feedback as possible. The 21st will also be an opportunity to do that. But basically after the 21st, that would be the closing of the window of, or maybe it has to be a couple days. I don't know what you guys think about that, but somewhere shortly thereafter, we have to say, okay, this is the final document that we're sending out now with the campus feedback incorporated. So somewhere right around the end of February, and before March 1st, that would be when the letter and the council agreed to previously to have everything out, the campus feedback and the guidance document. So that would kind of wrap up this, at least this iteration of the council's work. At the point at which we've sent out that guidance document. And then we also can get some more clarity on sort of what is the role of the campus, the climate council, excuse me, beyond that, if anything. Does that all sound like a sound plan for moving forward? Okay.
So, for the sort of around the webinar, would we ask for campuses to send in like initial questions by a certain date ahead of time?
I think we can definitely do that. What would be your suggestion? Because I mean, the other thing is we've kind of sent out like a brief save the date. I will have like, we can pull together a more like a PDF with an image, you know, that kind of stuff for save the date. I've already asked folks to save it, but what do you think would be a good, do you want to ask folks by like the 31st? So if we're able to send this out, right, our goal would be sending it out around the 30th, 31st. We had in the same time we're doing that, could ask folks to preemptively send questions that they have, and then that form could also include that same question, like, are there questions you would like answered on the webinar on the 21st?
Oh, so I was thinking that we meant sort of sending out the, I thought we might be sending out the completed document a little bit later. So, but maybe there would be a little more time than to get comments back. I guess one idea would be like, do we try to have a time held to discuss or like coordinate how to handle the webinar between when campuses receive the document and when we have the webinar? Or is that kind of like organization something that we can just do online and through like an open document, that kind of thing?
I'm happy with either. I'm definitely, if it's, there'll be some coordination, I'm sure, right? And I mean, part of that is just us, just making sure that I'm getting people's names right and titles right when we're sending out a save the date in terms of who's going to be there, and having folks register for it and just get the Zoom. And registration is just like a Zoom link. It's not nothing formal about it. But I think we could definitely, yeah, I mean, I think we could definitely have right now, choose an hour to come together. I think we also could do some of that, you know, just informally kind of online. It was the same kind of, which is not everybody represented here, but the same group of people who had agreed at our last meeting to sort of be available were the folks we were going to list as the panelists, quote unquote, right, who were going to be able to talk about. But I also think it'd be really helpful in advance to say, okay, you know, I'm going to go over section 1, you're going to go over section 2, you're going to go over section 3, this person's going to go over like the process. Like, it'd be helpful to also have just kind of talking points or slides, you know, that we each wanted to cover during that time. So to your point, maybe actually setting aside time is more helpful than trying to do it online. And we want to make sure folks like Cameron, who wanted to be a part of that, are able to be part of the time, like make sure it works for him. I think Debbie really wants to be part of it. Hillary wants to be part of it. So my only fear with kind of setting time right now is that some of the people that I'm hoping are going to be the panelists on there are not necessarily here with us today. But I'm also really happy we could just choose time and then follow up. And if it doesn't work, we could try again, you know.
Can we use like a doodle poll or something like that?
Do you all want to come up with a couple times before we pivot this afternoon? And I can throw those out. So if they mostly work for us, we'll see. So maybe we can do 2 or 3 times that work. Maybe the week of the 5th and the 12th are the 2 weeks that we look at in terms of timing, just because that'll be right before the week of the 21st. The 2 Wednesdays of those both weeks I cannot do, but I have time otherwise around that place. Are there days of the week that are better for folks?
It certainly doesn't have to revolve around my availability, but I'll be in a bunch of trainings the week of the 5th. So Fridays wide open for me. I know Fridays aren't everyone's favorite for meetings, but that's what I would put out there. The 9th would be the best for me.
Do folks have time a little earlier in the day by chance on a Friday the 9th? I have some afternoon stuff. And obviously I technically don't need to be at everything either. So somebody else could handle the, you know, sort of like bookkeeping, I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but that kind of stuff. Okay, so the 9th does like a 10 a.m., a 11 a.m. Does 10 a.m. work for most of you? Lisa, is this a court? And I want to, this is why we did last time. I just literally caught myself. I'm sorry. I want to make sure you're an important part of the council. So if you have court stuff, I also don't want it to come in conflict with that, because I know that's not a fair barrier.
Right now, I don't have anything scheduled. I'm not in charge of my schedule with court. It's up to the parties, unfortunately. So, but right now there's nothing on that Friday morning.
Okay. Do you want to also choose a separate time in the afternoon in case that doesn't work on the same day? Is that helpful to have another? I know we're going to send these to our colleagues also, so it'll be dependent on them. But do we also want to choose like maybe a noon or a 1 p.m.? Again, if we could do it earlier, good. But that way, in case it doesn't work for anybody else. Okay. And then what is another day? So the rest of that week isn't great for you, Kara. The following week is the 12th. Is there another day we want to choose the week of the 12th that we could offer up to our colleagues also? That Friday the 16th, we're traveling, so I won't be able to do it. And that 14th, we have an all staff training thing, so I won't be available on the 14th either.
I'm doing workshop all week on the week of the 5th and the week of the 12th. I'll be in school. And I don't have my own schedule yet.
Hold on 1 second. I'm gonna mute and you're gonna try to re-say that because it's echoing. I can't. I don't know if it's just me that's hearing it, but I couldn't catch it.
Do not hold out for me. I have schools all week on the 5th, the week of the 5th, and the week of the 12th. I'm in school, and so it depends on what school I'm in, and it depends on I have downtime. So just throw out times, and I'll see if I can make any of them. So yeah, don't hold out for me.
Okay, I am not sure because I don't know if anybody else is hearing what I am hearing in terms of like the echoiness, right? I think what you said is you're in lots of schools those 2 weeks. You'll try to make it, but don't hold it around your stuff because you're in. Okay. All right, we're good. Perfect. Appreciate it. All right. So how about Monday the 12th, Tuesday the 13th? Do either of those days work for you all possibly?
I'm more open on the 13th, but
Okay.
I could do the 12th, like midday or afternoon too, whichever.
Yeah, I have little pockets here and there. Thursday afternoon, the 15th also works for me.
So do we want to offer up? I have a tips meeting at 10. I think these are always 10. So I can also do Thursday afternoon. So do we want to offer up the 13th? It sounds like afternoon of the 13th works better for folks. So you want to offer up a 1 p.m. again? Is that okay? Is that an okay time? And then we'll do the same thing, a 1 p.m. on the 15th. We'll offer up. Down, not for Lisa, forget it. All right, we're only offering the 13th then. So we have 3 times. We're going to try to do it on the 9th or the 13th, and we'll offer up times. Again, it's Cameron, Hillary, Debbie, I'm guessing maybe some of our coaches. I don't know who else, but I want to make sure other folks just have the opportunity to also weigh in. So I will send that out, in addition with the updated draft between today and Monday for everyone. And then I'll put all of the target dates that we have in terms of when we want to get their feedback, which is going to be, again, everybody taking another look by the end of next week, is the 26th. That following week, the week of the 29th, is when I'm going to try to have the draft of the one that is just kind of a little bit more polished. And then we'll all look at it again, and then we'll have this date, and then obviously we'll plan for the Q&A session on the 21st. And then as we hear back, so Desire, as you hear back, you know, and as we hear back from her about OLR and some of the guidance that they offered up there, we'll make sure that we circle back and share that in email with all of you. So we kind of know, like, it's going to take a little more time, or we have a really definitive answer and we're good to go. But we'll share that with you as we get those updates. All right. I appreciate it. Go ahead, Lisa.
Oh, I do have a question. So are we not going by that March 1st deadline for the institutions to, at the very least, just announce to their schools that we're having a assessment that's coming out? I mean, I think that's all that our letter said that they had to do, was just make an announcement that there's this survey and it's coming out. And then, so, I mean, is there some place where we can, you know, reiterate, you need to have this announcement to your schools by March 1st? Is that not a deadline anymore? I pulled that from, I think, the draft letter or the initial letter.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is. I think no matter what, the intention is to have the assessments complete by the end of the academic year. And like March is you're kind of butting up against, you know, the last semester anyway. So my thinking is that, yes, that's what the letter, when we sent it out to campuses a few weeks ago, right? That's what it kind of highlighted also. So we can definitely think about how we really push that again, to say to folks at this point, like, these, you know, should be started, you should have a plan, and they should be completed in the academic year. Maybe highlight that in the next communication to all the campuses. But I think that was kind of the intention of that letter also, is a signal to folks, like, you need to be doing this, you need to be ready to do it. And I think folks know about, like, I don't know exactly how everybody knows about it, but I've had a number of people from all different universities and all different size universities reach out to me just to say, hey, like, I heard there's this thing, are we supposed to be doing it? I've had folks reach out to ask me for the ARC3 or ACR3, I'm not sure how I'm supposed to say it, in the AAU study. I've had, you know, different questions who have come, so it's clearly they know about it. So I mean, I think that's one of the nice things, is however it's gotten out, and maybe it's just word of mouth, honestly. There are all different institutions who have reached out with questions, so folks who really are getting the word out, which is nice.
I think there's also there's been so much kind of turmoil around the most recent update to VAWA, that there's also this federal thing that's coming that might be soon, or it might take years and years. And there are new regs, but when are they going to drop? That this prescribing legislation kind of was new a few years ago, and then there was this little sort of, there's almost like a pause potentially, or a perception of a pause. And so I think, you know, my hope is that the guidance that the research team is able to provide about how compliance questions would be answered might also bring some helpful context to campuses who are wondering, like, oh, where, like, how should we be thinking about the relationship between this prescribing legislation having a date printed in it, and also all of the activities that are happening on a campus, and a pretty complicated, you know, set of conversations that are happening. That, you know, maybe there's something that can be that will come through that guidance that will sort of clarify, like, how we can think about this in the context of other ways that campuses need to do reporting and need to have compliance activities ongoing.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I appreciate you all coming out on a snowy, at least here, Friday afternoon. I hope you all have a great weekend. Stay safe and warm. And again, I just really appreciate everybody putting the effort in and helping us with the council. And if you have any questions in the meantime, please don't hesitate at all to reach out. But you can expect to hear back from me with this updated document by Monday. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Right.